Vincent van Gogh, Self-Portrait with Bandaged Ear, 1889. Biography. B. 1853, D. 1890. Vincent van Gogh was born on March 30, 1853, in Groot-Zundert, Holland, Netherlands. He was a Dutch painter. Family. Vincent van Gogh's father was a country minister, and his mother was an artist whose love of nature, drawing and watercolors influenced Van Gogh. The eldest of 6 children, Van Gogh was a melancholy child. Early life. At age 15, Van Gogh's family was struggling financially, and he was forced to leave school and go to work. He got a job at his uncle's art dealership, Gogh & Co., in The Hague. In June of 1873, Van Gogh was transferred to London. He loved London and fell in love with his landlady's daughter. When she rejected his marriage proposal, Van Gogh suffered a breakdown and found support in Christianity. In the winter of 1878, Van Gogh volunteered to move to an impoverished coal mine in the south of Belgium. He preached and ministered to the sick. He drew pictures of the miners and their families. Those in charge were not pleased. They disapproved of Van Gogh's self-imposed hardship, which had begun to take on a tone of martyrdom. They refused to renew Van Gogh's contract, and he was forced to find another occupation. Van Gogh the artist. In 1880, Van Gogh decided to move to Brussels and become an artist. Though he had no formal art training, his brother Theo offered to support him financially. Van Gogh's art helped him to express himself emotionally. In 1885, he began work on what is thought to be his first masterpiece, Potato Eaters. His brother Theo believed the painting would not be well received in Paris, where Impressionism was having an impact. Van Gogh moved to Paris and in March 1886 and moved into his brother Theo's small apartment. In Paris, Van Gogh first saw Impressionist art, and he was inspired by the color and light. Van Gogh was passionate about art and he argued with other artists about their work, finding it difficult to keep friends. He was socially challenged, and it was through his paintings that Van Gogh was able to express himself most clearly. Van Gogh's post-impressionistic style was unique at that time. His colors were vibrant and the shapes were strange and distorted. He produced over 2,000 works of art, but despite his brother's attempts, he only sold 1 painting in his lifetime. His work was not popular because it did not fit in with the more realistic Academy style of the period. Van Gogh in Arles. Van Gogh became influenced by Japanese art and culture. He dreamed of traveling to Japan, but was told by other artists that the quality of light in Arles in the south of France was similar to Japan. In 1888 Van Gogh moved to Arles and lived in the Yellow House. Here he intended to set up an artists' group with his friend Paul Gauguin and invite other artists to live and work in Arles, capturing the brilliant light and the lives of the ordinary people. However, this was never to be. He lived a frugal life in the Yellow House and spent the money Theo sent him on paint rather than food. The painting, Self-Portrait with Bandaged Ear. Context of the self-portrait: this is what was happening at the time. This self-portrait was painted shortly after Van Gogh returned home from hospital, having mutilated his own ear in December 1888. Van Gogh was living on coffee, bread and absinthe at the time, and he became physically ill. His mental health was also declining. Around this time, he is known to have sipped on turpentine and eaten paint. His brother Theo was worried about him and he offered Van Gogh's friend, Paul Gauguin, money to go to Arles to be with him. Within a month, Van Gogh and Gauguin were arguing constantly, and one night, Gauguin walked out. Van Gogh followed him, and when Gauguin turned around, he saw Van Gogh holding a razor in his hand. It is not clear what Van Gogh's intention was, but the outcome was destructive. The police found Van Gogh in his room the next morning, and admitted him to hospital having cut off his ear. He was weak from blood loss and was having violent seizures. In January 1889 he was released from hospital. He was alone and depressed. He turned to painting and nature, but could not find peace of mind. His dream of founding an artists' group in Hull had reached its end. For a short time, he carried on living and painting in the Yellow House. When he returned home he painted self-portrait with bandaged ear. However, within a few weeks he was removed from his home and taken to Hull Hospital. Van Gogh's brother Theo helped him to move to a private asylum in St. Remy, a small town north of Hull, and in a little over a year he died. He had shot himself in the chest and died of his wounds with his brother at his side. Influences, where Van Gogh got his ideas and inspiration. Van Gogh was initially influenced by the work of Joseph Israels. Israels was a Dutch painter who painted in a realistic, dark style. Van Gogh liked his work because he painted the lives of those living with hardship rather than the wealthy. This was unusual at that time. When in Paris, Van Gogh was inspired by the work of the Impressionists. He enjoyed the colorful, lively, light-hearted style that conveyed movement and light. He adopted their broken color technique and experimented with pointillism. As with many artists and designers of the late 19th century, Van Gogh was influenced by the import of Japanese woodcut prints. The art and culture of Japan changed Van Gogh's way of painting. The artists of Japan offered colorful palettes, exotic subject matter and simplified shapes with dark outlines. Some depicted tranquil landscapes and some had swirling lines and dramatic scenes. The most famous of them was Hokusai, who shared Van Gogh's passion for depicting the lives of ordinary people. Subject matter: what do you see in the painting? Self-portrait with bandaged ear shows the artist in three-quarter profile in his studio in the Yellow House. He is wearing layers of clothes with a rough, dark green coat on top. It is buttoned at the front with one round button. He is wearing a blue cap with dark fur trim. His right ear is heavily bandaged with the white cloth that wraps around his chin. Behind him to his right is an easel with a canvas on it. Barely visible is a faint outline of an unfinished work. The top of the easel has been cropped by the edge of the canvas on one side and his hat on the other, forming a fork-like shape. To his left is a blue framed window or door which is open, partly covered by the ridge of his cheek, and his hat is a Japanese woodblock print showing two geishas in a landscape with Mount Fuji in the background. The bright foreign landscape is in contrast to the artist huddled in his winter clothes. Scale of the painting: dimensions and the objects depicted. The size of the painting is 60.5 centimeters by 50 centimeters. The self-portrait is approximately life-size. The image of Van Gogh almost fills the frame. This makes him the focus of the painting. The intention is for the viewer of the painting to be focused Van Gogh. The life-size scale of the portrait gives the feeling that you could be sitting or standing next to the subject, almost in conversation. Other objects in the painting are placed behind the subject. Their scale is realistic, which gives the effect of shallow depth to the room. Style. Van Gogh is considered to be a post-impressionist artist. His loose, expressive style set him apart from other artists of the late 19th century. Post-impressionism is the term used to describe a style of painting that developed out of Impressionism. Impressionists tried to paint objects and landscapes as if someone had just caught a glimpse of them in passing. They used small touches of pure color to capture the fleeting impression, light and color. They were influenced by new scientific theories about the physics of color. Post-impressionists rejected ideas about objects being seen as just a fleeting image of nature. They were interested in restoring order and structure to their paintings. Post-impressionists distorted shapes and used unnatural colors for expressive effect. However, they did continue to use the saturated, pure colors of the Impressionists. Van Gogh adapted Impressionist techniques and use of color to express his strong emotions. He changed his style from the short brush strokes of Impressionism into long, exaggerated, curving and vibrant lines. These expressive lines convey an emotional response to his surroundings. His loose, deliberate brush strokes of broken color expressed his feelings rather than painting reality. He used vibrant colors that often give a sense of joy, and distorted shapes that give a dreamlike quality. Mood and atmosphere. Van Gogh has created a mood of thoughtfulness and melancholy in his painting Self-Portrait with Bandaged Ear. The prominent bandage shows that this has been an important event in Van Gogh's life. The expression on his face is neither happy or sad. He looks like he is quietly contemplating recent events and possibly thinking about his future. The general use of a subdued, harmonious color palette suggests calmness and stillness. Greens and yellows dominate the canvas, which creates an atmosphere of illness. His thick overcoat and fur hat add to the image of illness, suggesting that he cold is in his studio. The objects around Van Gogh enclose the space, creating an atmosphere that could be read either as security or constraint. Repeated vertical lines in the background hold the viewer's gaze, making the room feel small and cramped. Only the open door or window offers in some air, or a way out. The light in the studio is quite flat with little contrast, adding to the trance-like atmosphere. Composition, arrangement. Viewpoint, the artist and the viewer. The viewer is lower than the artist. This makes the figure seem larger. The figure is not looking directly at the viewer. He is gazing into another part of his studio. Rule of thirds. How is the painting divided up? Van Gogh has used the rule of thirds to place his face in the center of the portrait. The Japanese print has been placed at one of the intersections of the lines. This gives it more significance. Space. The objects in the studio and the vertical lines in the background give this self-portrait a sense of confined space. The figure is gazing into a space that we cannot see. This gives the impression that there is more to the room than what we see. The positive space, the figure, and the negative space, the background, are of similar size. This helps to balance the painting. Depth of field. How much depth does the middle and background of the painting have? The depth of field is short. The image has a sense of flattened perspective similar to the style of the Japanese prints. Van Gogh could have done this deliberately given his interest in Japanese art and culture. There is not much illusion of space between the figure and the wall behind. All objects are face-on to the viewer with no sense of depth. There are no lines of perspective leading the eye into a distant space. The light in the room is bright and flat, giving little sense of contrasting tone. Balance. Balance is created in Van Gogh's self-portrait by using repeated shapes and colors. The large triangle of the figure is balanced by the smaller triangles found in the overlap of the overcoat, the face, the top of the easel and Mount Fuji in the Japanese print. The rectangular canvas on the left and the print on the right are balanced by the larger rectangle of the door, window on the far right. The circles formed by the eyes are balanced by the circle of the coat button. This group of shapes forms another triangle in the painting. Color balance has been created by repeating the color palette throughout the painting. The blue of the hat is found in the door, window, the figure in the Japanese print, the edge of the bandage and throughout the brushwork in the overcoat. The greens of the background are found in the face and the overcoat. The warmer hues of the face are repeated in the easel, some of the layers of clothing and in the Japanese print. The darkest tone of the painting is found in the fur trim and could have unbalanced the painting. However, Van Gogh has balanced this dark area with the heavy dark outlines of the overcoat and the dark shadow down the left sleeve. Movement, how the viewer's eye moves around the objects in painting and within the painting. Although the figure in this painting is static, and there is no sense of atmospheric movement, the way in which Van Gogh handles the medium creates a sense of movement. Van Gogh has used dark outlines to curve and contour around objects in the painting. This gives a sense of fluid movement around the self-portrait. It leads the viewer's eye around the work in a smooth, sinuous movement. His use of strokes of broken color throughout the painting give it a sense of quiet rhythm. The lines on the overcoat give the illusion of gently flexing cloth. Focal point and leading lines. Where does the viewer's eye go to first? The focal point in this painting is near Van Gogh's left eye. The viewer's eye is drawn to the point where the side of his face meets the Japanese print. This is achieved in several ways. The color contrast between the brighter green of the print and the warm earthy red of his cheek. The colors of the Japanese print are the brightest in the painting. The angle of the fur on the hat points to the Japanese print. The angle of the canvas top and the eyeline point to the focal point. The angle of the right shoulder and the eyeline point to the focal point. The vertical line of the edge of the print holds the eye. The line created by the left shoulder and the side of the figure's face lead to the focal point. Contrast. Contrast can be found in this self-portrait in the use of color, tone and texture. The most prominent color contrast is in the Japanese print. Bright reds are placed against vibrant greens, making this area of the painting stand out. This color contrast has also been used where Van Gogh's left cheek meets the Japanese print. The blue hat and door, window are placed against the yellow-green of the background wall. This contrast helps to frame the face of the figure. The contrasting tone of the dark fur of the hat next to the pale greenish skin makes the skin seem even paler, adding to the look of illness in Van Gogh. The dark tone of the overcoat also has this effect and frames the white bandaged ear against the contrasting dark tone of the fur. The loose media handling technique has created texture throughout the painting, but the texture of the heavy, rough overcoat and the thick fur hat contrast with the smoother brush strokes of the skin and bandaged ear. This gives Van Gogh's face a slightly waxy look, adding to his ill appearance. Lighting. In this work the light is soft. It has not created deep shadows and leaves the image quite flat in appearance. Van Gogh might be deliberately flattening the image to copy the style of Japanese woodblock prints. The flat light brings the background wall close to the figure, increasing the sense of an enclosed space. The light source seems to be inside the room somewhere to Van Gogh's right and above him. It is not from the door, window on his left. This suggests another window with stronger light coming through it, or artificial light. The light source illuminates the bandaged ear, drawing attention to it. Media handling and technique. One of the most characteristic things about Van Gogh's paintings was his media handling technique. Van Gogh's expressive style comes from his emotional response to nature. His use of strong outlines and regular brush strokes to create form and rhythm separates him from the earlier Impressionists. He used thick paint in broad strokes painted directly onto the canvas. The paint was applied so thickly that the brush marks were easy to see. The paint would mix on the canvas when colors were applied next to each other. This style of painting is called impasto and it creates texture on the surface of the canvas. It gives the appearance of sticking out of the painting. In this self-portrait Van Gogh has used impasto painting to carefully render form. Although the paint marks are broken and textured, they have been carefully and deliberately placed. There is no sense of a hurried or frantic application of the medium. The outlines around the overcoat and hat are heavily laid down in thick paint, but the objects in the background have been given a lighter touch using drier paint marks that almost disappear in places. The paint in the overcoat and hat has been laid down in thick textural marks that contour over the surface of the fabrics, adding to the impression of rough, unrefined clothes. The colors mix together in places looking like woven threads. The media handling on the face is smoother than the overcoat and hat. This gives the skin a waxy appearance, implying his ill health. The Japanese print has been painted with lighter, wispy brush strokes, leaving some of the canvas showing through. This might indicate the very different style of Japanese art. The visual elements. Color. The general use of a subdued, harmonious color palette suggests calmness and stillness. Greens and yellows dominate the canvas, which creates an atmosphere of illness. The cool blue in the hat is repeated in the Japanese print and the door, window frame. It is also present in the coat, creating the rough texture of the garment. The cool greens and blues contrast with the warmer yellows, greens and browns, helping to frame Van Gogh's face. A cool blue line contours the edge of the bandage, unifying the chin, the bandage and the hat. It leads the viewer's eye along the length of the bandage, drawing attention to the injury. The brightest colors in the painting are in the Japanese print on the wall behind Van Gogh. The red stands out against its complementary green, and the print also contains the three primary colors. This draws the viewer's attention to the focal point where the face of the artist and the print meet. The contrast between the bright colors of the print and the subdued colors of the rest of the painting could suggest Van Gogh's unrealized dreams of artistic perfection. The colors of the print are reflected in Van Gogh's face. He has used primary, secondary and tertiary colors in the face: red, yellow, blue, violet, green, orange and brown. Although there are more colors in his face, the tone is subdued in contrast to the bright, lively colors of the print. This adds to the sense that he is unwell and may be contemplating a brighter future. He has also placed his reddish cheek against the bright green of the Japanese print. These complementary colors draw our attention to that part of the painting, creating a focal point. Van Gogh has used long strokes of broken color that add texture to the painting. The colors are not solid. There are many hues side by side on the canvas, creating the impression of one color. The green used in the Japanese print and the blue used in the fur hat are laid side by side in the coat in long brush strokes to create its darker color. The green of Van Gogh's eyes is also repeated in the Japanese print. The use of the same or similar colors around the canvas helps to unify and balance the painting. Line. Van Gogh uses bold outlines around some of the objects in the painting. The lines are created with broad strokes of the brush. Some lines are continuous and some are broken and sketchy. The dark outlines around objects were influenced by Japanese woodblock prints and help to create defined shapes. The lines around the coat and hat are heavy and dark. This makes it look like the figure is in the foreground. The lines around the easel, the Japanese print and the door are lighter in color and weight. This makes it look like these objects are further back in the painting. The loose application of the lines adds to the texture of the coat and hat, making them look chunky and unrefined. Lines are also present in the application of color. Long strokes of broken color create directional and contouring lines around objects, giving the illusion of form. Tone. The dark tones in the self-portrait are in the fur of the hat, the rough overcoat and in the eyes. The fur trim of the hat is the darkest tone. This helps to draw the viewer's gaze to the lighter face and bandage around the ear by creating the highest tonal contrast in the painting. The dark tone of the overcoat and the dark trim of the hat frame the artist's face. The face is tonally light, and lightest of all is the bandage around the ear. The green of the Japanese print and the tone on the left side of the face are similar, giving the impression that the face and the print are merging together. The darker tone on the left sleeve of the overcoat helps to create the illusion of form and leads the eye up the portrait to the face and the hat. The background has been painted in a lighter tone, contrasting with the figure. This makes the figure stand out and appear to be closer to the viewer. The door, window is darker than the rest of the background. This gives the impression that it is open. It also stops the gaze of the viewer from traveling out of the picture. The eyes are dark against the pale skin, creating a diagonal line leading the viewer's eye towards the Japanese print. Texture. There is a unified texture throughout this self-portrait. This has been created using long, broken brush strokes. The paint is mainly thickly applied, giving the surface a rough texture that adds to the sense of an impoverished lifestyle. The overcoat seems thick and rough. Van Gogh has used thick, heavy outlines to suggest the width of the fabric. He has used loose brush strokes that contour around the bulk of the fabric. The hat seems soft and curved. Areas of tone imply folds and dips in the fabric. The dark fur trim has been painted with short, narrow strokes of the brush. They go in many different directions like real fur. There is very little contrast in the dark tone of the fur, making it look deep and soft. The bandage around the ear looks softer. It has been painted using shorter, more even brush strokes. There is the impression of a soft dressing underneath formed by contouring the brush strokes around the bandage. The Japanese print is flatter in texture. It has been painted with dry, lightweight strokes of the brush. Shape. The dominant shape in this self-portrait is the triangle. Van Gogh has created a bold, upward-pointing triangular shape with the edges of the figure. There is a small triangular gap in the overlap of the coat. He has created a downward-pointing triangular shape with the face and bandaged ear. Other triangles can be found at the top of the easel and in the image of Mount Fuji in the Japanese print. Historically, the direction of a triangle can be symbolic. A triangle pointing up could represent a strong foundation or stability. It might also represent rising up to a spiritual world. A triangle pointing down can represent a descent into the physical world. Van Gogh would have been aware of these artistic traditions and might have used them in this painting to reflect his feelings. Van Gogh has also repeated rectangular shapes in this painting. The door, window, the canvas and the Japanese print, each appear to be squeezed into the painting. They are all placed close together tightly behind the figure. This gives the impression of a small, confined space closing the figure in. It might also indicate a secure space with familiar and loved objects. The rectangular Japanese print also frames Van Gogh's face as he looks to the left into the room. Form. Although the light is flat in this painting and there is little tonal contrast, Van Gogh has created form using outlines, impasto brush strokes and broken color. Van Gogh has used heavy outlines on the rough overcoat contouring around the edge to create the shape and thickness of the cloth. He has used softer, broken lines to create the folded forms of the bandage around his ear and the features of his face. The impasto brush strokes follow the direction of objects in the painting. They follow the folds of the fabrics, the face and the vertical direction of the wall and door, window. This gives the illusion of 3 dimensions. Broken color and tonal variation prevent the objects from looking flat and gives them the illusion of depth. There is some tonal shading around the figure, but the influence of Japanese prints can be seen in his use of flatter forms. Pattern. Pattern is created in this self-portrait using repeated shapes, colors and brush strokes. Triangles can be found in the shape of the figure, the shape of the face, the easel and the image of Mount Fuji in the Japanese print. Rectangles are repeated in the door, window, the canvas and the Japanese print. The color palette is repeated throughout and creates a unified effect. The thick impasto brush strokes can be found repeated throughout the painting, leaving a textured pattern of broken color. The highly decorative pattern in the Japanese print acts as a contrast to the more subdued working of the self-portrait.